The thing is, I never thought calling my husband soft was cruel. I thought it was honest with better lighting. 2 drinks, 1 joke, and of course my friends understood what I meant before I finished saying it. Then I invited my ex to our house to see if Grant would finally show fire. By the end of the night, every person in that room knew I had tested the wrong man. My name is Harper Bell. I am 32, and I manage brand experience for a furniture showroom where people buy a life before they buy a sofa. The thing is, I was good at making rooms tell people who they wanted to be. Of course, I thought that meant I understood what strength looked like inside a home. The showroom smelled like leather polish and orange candles that afternoon. I was setting a mock living room around a walnut coffee table, moving bourbon-coloured pillows until the whole space looked warm enough to forgive a high price. Lindsay stood near the velvet chair with her arms folded, watching me work like I was arranging a stage. She said Grant would look perfect in that room because he had safe furniture energy. Then she laughed and added that my husband was basically a comfortable doormat with a good salary. 2 pillows. 1 laugh. Nothing serious. I laughed too. Not loudly. Just enough to make the joke belong to both of us. Grant came in 10 minutes later with coffee from the place near the showroom and a paper bag with the almond croissant I always forgot to buy myself. He wore his grey coat, the one that made him look too calm for any room I wanted to impress. He noticed the display bracket was loose before I did, took a screwdriver from the storage drawer, and fixed it without asking for attention. That was Grant. Quiet work, clean hands, no announcement. A year before, my first big installation had failed the night before a launch. The back panel bowed out, the lighting strip snapped, and I sat on the showroom floor with mascara under one eye. Grant drove over after midnight, rebuilt the display wall, and left before the owner arrived. I got praised for saving the launch. He never told anyone he had done it. Back then, that felt like love. Later, it started to feel like another thing nobody saw. When Lindsay left, Grant asked if something had changed between us lately. He said I sounded different when I talked about him around my friends. What he meant was that he heard distance. What I heard was that he wanted me to make his calmness feel exciting. I told him nothing had changed, of course. I said he was being too serious about a showroom joke. He nodded and picked up my empty coffee cup before leaving. That night, Lindsay texted that maybe I needed to find out whether Grant had any fire left in him. The kitchen light in our house always made the counters look cleaner than they were. That evening, it showed every wine glass, every crumb near the cutting board, and the phone sitting between my hand and Lindsay's voice. The thing is, speakerphone makes a conversation feel less private, but not exactly public. It lives in that middle space where people say too much and still call it harmless. 2 friends on the line, 1 husband upstairs. No audience, I told myself. Lindsay was still talking about the showroom joke. Naomi had joined the call, and she had the kind of voice that made every bad idea sound like a study she had once half read. Lindsay said she was not trying to be cruel, but Grant was soft. Naomi said some men were built for comfort, not heat. I said that I loved my husband, of course. Then I said the part that mattered more. I said there was no fire. I said being married to Grant sometimes felt like being married to a cloud. A reliable cloud. A polite doormat. I used a light voice because lightness made it sound less ugly. The hallway floor creaked once. I did not look up fast enough. Grant had come down in socks, silent as always, and I saw only the edge of his sleeve before he turned back. He did not interrupt. He did not ask what I meant. He simply left the doorway like a man giving the room back to the people who had already taken it. For 1 second, Lindsay stopped talking. Then she said maybe that proved her point. I should have gone after him. Instead, I opened the fridge and stared at a carton of oat milk like it had asked me a question. Naomi said Derek would get a reaction out of him. She said my ex had the kind of energy that made men reveal themselves. Lindsay jumped on it quickly. She said we could invite a few people over Friday and make it casual. No trap, she said. Just a social test. The word test should have sounded worse than it did. Derek Vance had been my boyfriend for 4 months before Grant. He was loud, broad, magnetic in the cheap way that worked better after 2 drinks. He had once argued with a valet because the man had parked his truck too far from the entrance. At 27, I thought that was protection. At 32, I called it ridiculous when I wanted to sound grown. But part of me remembered what it felt like when a man made space around me by force. The thing is, my mother spent 28 years married to a man who never raised his voice, never defended her, and never made anyone leave a room for disrespecting her. My father was not cruel. He was kind in the faded way old wallpaper is kind. When my mother cried after dinner parties, she said a soft man made a woman alone in public. I hated that sentence. I also carried it like a key. Grant came back downstairs 20 minutes later and asked if I wanted dinner heated. His voice was even. Too even. I said I had already eaten. I had not. He looked at the phone in my hand and asked, specific and factual, whether I had called him soft to Lindsay. He said he had heard Cloud and Doormat from the hallway. There it was. One named incident. One real question. What he meant was that I had hurt him in his own house. What I heard was that he wanted to make one private complaint into a trial. I told him everyone vents. I said wives were allowed to talk to friends without being audited. I said if the words bothered him that much, maybe he should ask why they sounded believable. His face changed by almost nothing. The corner of his mouth went flat. He rinsed the pan he had been using and set it upside down on the drying rack. That was the consequence. Dinner disappeared. His voice disappeared with it. Friday came fast because bad ideas move faster once other people help carry them. Lindsay made the group chat. Naomi sent drink suggestions. Claire reacted with one small thumbs up and nothing else. Claire always watched more than she spoke. That should have made me careful. Instead, I told myself she was boring. Brooke saw the messages later. Brooke was the friend who asked real questions and hated games she could not name cleanly. She called me while I was in the showroom stockroom, counting linen swatches. She asked if I was actually inviting Derek to my house to test my husband. She said it carefully, like the words were dirty and she did not want them touching her mouth. I told her not to make it dramatic. I said Derek was an old friend, and Grant needed to stop hiding behind calmness. Brooke said Grant was not hiding just because he did not perform anger. That annoyed me more than Lindsay's jokes had pleased me. I told Brooke she always protected men who looked sad quietly. Brooke said she protected people who were being set up. After we hung up, I texted Lindsay that Brooke was being moral again. Lindsay sent 3 laughing messages and said the party was going to be iconic. That word warmed me in a way I did not want to examine. Later, Brooke called Grant from a parking lot. I did not know that then. I only knew that by the time I got home, Grant was not there, and 3 unfamiliar cars were already along the curb because Lindsay had arrived early with Naomi and bottles of wine. I put crackers on a board, lit the orange candle, and told myself this was just a party. By 7:30, music moved through our living room. Derek had texted that he was close, and my husband's car was parked outside our own house with the headlights off. The living room smelled like bourbon, orange wax, and the cheese board Lindsay had half built on my kitchen counter. The thing is, a house can feel different when other people are inside it before the person who owns half of it has agreed. Of course, I told myself Grant would understand once he saw everyone laughing. 2 bottles open, 1 front door. No way to call it private anymore. Grant walked in at 7:40. He saw Lindsay by the bookshelf, Naomi on the couch, Claire in the corner chair, and Brooke standing near the kitchen with her coat still on. His eyes moved through the room, not fast, not startled, just taking inventory. That was my husband. A man could walk into a trap and still notice who needed a coaster. I crossed the room and told him it had turned into a thing. Lindsay had invited people, I said, as if the party had formed itself out of weather. He looked at me, then at the glasses on the counter. He said that was fine. He kissed my cheek and went to the kitchen to pour himself a drink. Not angry, not jealous, not alive enough. Derek arrived 20 minutes later, laughing before the door even closed behind him. He filled the room the way he always had, with shoulders and teeth and a voice that made smaller conversations step aside. When I introduced him, I said his name first, then paused before saying, Grant was my husband. The pause was tiny. Tiny things count. Derek shook Grant's hand too long. He told Grant he had heard a lot about him. Grant said he hoped the better parts had survived editing. A few people laughed. Derek did not know if he had been insulted, so he smiled harder. Lindsay drifted in almost right away and said Derek and I went way back. She stretched the words like a ribbon. I looked at Grant to see what would happen. Nothing happened. That was the problem I thought I had. Grant became the host. He topped off drinks, asked Naomi about her sister's move, gave Brooke the white wine she liked without being asked, and found a clean glass for Claire. Brooke watched him with a strange, quiet face. Claire put her phone down. Derek took the center of the room after his second drink. He talked about gyms, men, discipline, and how women wanted leadership even when they pretended they did not. Naomi nodded until Grant asked what research she meant. He asked it politely. She opened her mouth and closed it around nothing useful. Derek tried to laugh it off. Grant let him. That was how it went for a while. Derek made big claims. Grant asked small questions, not sharp questions. Worse, clean questions. The kind that gave Derek enough rope and a polite chair to stand on. When Derek said men should lead, Grant asked what happened when the man was wrong. Derek said a man owned it. Grant asked whether the woman got input before the next decision. Derek said trust came from confidence. Grant said that sounded circular. The room got quieter. The thing is, I had invited Derek because I wanted Grant to show fire. I did not expect him to use water and still drown the room. Derek felt it. I could see that. His shoulders lifted. His laugh got louder. He moved closer to me on the couch and touched my shoulder twice while talking. Not enough for anyone to call it anything. Enough for everyone to see. Grant saw. Of course he did. He said nothing. He only set his glass down on the kitchen island and asked Derek if he had children. Derek said he had a daughter. Grant asked if co-parenting was hard. He said it with enough kindness that Derek had no place to put his bragging. Derek said he managed and had women lined up. Lindsay made a small sound that died before it became approval. Naomi looked into her glass. Claire watched me then, not Derek. I should have been embarrassed. Instead, I felt cheated. Derek was supposed to make Grant look small, not himself look cheap. So when Lindsay asked Derek to tell the bar story, I let it happen. Derek told us how he had stopped a man outside a bar by stepping close and making him back down. He told it well. Even Grant seemed to listen. Derek asked what Grant would have done. Grant said he probably would have talked first and figured out what the man wanted. Derek laughed and said of course he would. Grant smiled. He said talking usually worked. Derek asked what happened if it did not. Grant looked at him and said then, it did not. Something in that sentence made Derek pause. But loud men do not retreat from one pause. They search for a louder currency. Around 9:45, Derek stretched his arms above his head and asked if Grant ever arm wrestled. Lindsay's face lit up too quickly. Naomi sat forward. Brooke moved into the kitchen doorway. Claire placed both hands in her lap. Grant looked at Derek, then at me. Not with fear, not with hurt I could use, with understanding. He said sure. The dining table became a stage. Derek rolled up his sleeve and planted his elbow like he had already won. Grant took off his black leather watch. He placed it on the table beside him, slow and careful. The small sound of leather on wood cut through the music. That watch was ordinary. He wore it every day. I had bought it for our first anniversary because he hated flashy things. On his wrist, it meant routine. On the table, it looked like a line drawn. Derek asked if Grant was sure. He said he would go easy. Grant thanked him for being thoughtful. They clasped hands. Derek pushed early before anyone finished counting. Grant's arm moved a little and Lindsay smiled. Then it stopped moving. At first, I thought Derek was playing. His face still had confidence on it, but the confidence began to work too hard. His shoulders leaned in. Grant stayed seated, calm, almost bored. He did not grin. He did not perform. He adjusted his wrists slightly, like someone turning a key. Derek's face reddened. The room heard his breath. Nobody laughed. Grant said Derek could take his time. That was the moment the party changed owners. Derek pushed harder. Grant did not seem to. He held, waited, shifted once, and then Derek's hand went down. Not slammed, not dramatic. Down with a steady final sound. The silence was worse than cheering. Grant released him and put his watch back on. One buckle. One quiet motion. My mouth had gone dry, so I drank from a glass that was not mine. Derek called it a trick. Grant agreed pleasantly. Derek stepped toward him with the look of a man who had run out of words. Grant did not step back. He only changed his stance, almost too small to see. Derek stopped. His body understood something before his face did. He left 5 minutes later after saying goodbye too loudly and stumbling once on the hall rug. No one laughed. That made it worse. The party emptied fast. Naomi hugged me without meeting my eyes. Claire told Grant goodnight in a tone that sounded newly careful. Brooke helped carry glasses to the kitchen. When she left, she told Grant he had been the best person in the room. She did not look at me when she said it. After the door closed, I went to Grant with my heart still beating like the room was not done. I told him he had been incredible. I said I had not known he had that in him. He looked at me like that sentence had finished the whole test. The house after the party smelled like warm glass, spilled bourbon, and the orange candle burning too low. The thing is, I thought Grant's win would bring him back to me. Of course, that is how little I understood what I had actually asked him to do. 2 empty bottles. 1 quiet husband. No applause left. He stood in the kitchen with his sleeves rolled down again. His black leather watch was back on his wrist. The buckle looked darker than usual under the ceiling light. I moved closer and touched his arm because that was what my body wanted after watching him turn the whole room inside out. Grant did not pull away, but he did not lean in. I told him he had proved everyone wrong. I said he should feel good. I said Derek had needed that. Grant asked what exactly I had not known he had in him. The question was calm, but it cut through the room. I told him I meant fire, edge, the part of him that did not just stand there and absorb things. He asked whether I had invited Derek into our house to force that part out. I said no. Then I said not exactly. Then I said Lindsay had made it into a bigger thing than I meant. That was when he named it. He said I had called him a doormat, invited an ex who still wanted to look important beside me, and waited to see whether my husband would fold in his own living room. I told him he was making it sound cruel. He said it had been cruel. The word did not land like I expected. Not loud, not dramatic, just placed on the counter between us. I changed tactic, softer voice, smaller shoulders. I told him maybe I had gone about it badly, but I needed to know he could stand up for himself. I said I needed to feel protected in public. I said calmness could look like absence when people crossed lines. Some of that was true. Enough truth to stand on. Grant said I had never asked him for protection. He said I had asked him to become evidence for an audience. Then he said it was not one party. It was months of little jokes, little corrections, little tests, the showroom comment, the kitchen call, the way I smiled when Lindsay made him small, naming the pattern, not one incident. The whole line of them. I told him he was good at collecting charges. His face went tired then. Not angry, tired. That was harder to fight, so I made it into coldness. The next morning, Grant drove to Mara's townhouse. I went because not going would have looked like guilt, and I still cared about shape. Mara was Grant's older sister, practical and sharp, with a house that smelled like cedar soap and black coffee. She hugged Grant at the door and did not hug me right away. That missing second said enough. She asked if I understood what it meant to make a calm person prove they were not weak. I said she had always treated Grant like porcelain. Mara said Grant was not fragile, he was restrained. Then she asked why I wanted to punish the restraint I had been safe inside for 2 years. I told her family loyalty was making her dramatic. She looked at Grant then, and her face softened. That was worse than anger. Grant said very little. He sat at her dining table with both hands around a mug. His shoulders were relaxed, but not in the way I knew. It looked like he had set something down and was not picking it up for me again. Brooke texted him while we were there. I saw her name light up on his phone. He did not hide it. He only turned the screen down after reading. That small trust between them irritated me because Brooke had warned him. Brooke had chosen a side before the party even began, and somehow she still looked cleaner than all of us. When we came home, I tried again. I said we could laugh about it later. I said Derek had embarrassed himself, not Grant. I said maybe the test had worked in a strange way because now I knew he had that fire. Grant went upstairs without answering. In the bedroom, he removed his watch and placed it on the dresser. Then he took off his wedding ring and set it beside the watch. He did not throw either one. He did not push them toward me. He simply placed them there with the same care he used when setting his keys in the bowl. The room narrowed around those two objects. The watch had always meant ordinary days. Coffee, work, bills paid before due dates, quiet drives, his hand on my back in crowded stores. Beside the ring, it looked like something had been measured and found finished. For a few seconds, the door opened. I saw him rebuilding my showroom wall after midnight. I saw him hearing the doormat joke and walking away because he still trusted me to come find him. I saw him at the table with Derek, not proving he was a man but refusing to let me write him as less than one. He had not been weak. He had been careful with power because he thought I was careful with him. My hand went to the edge of the dresser. I could have said his name differently. Then my phone buzzed. Phone. Lindsay had sent a message asking if Grant was still being intense after winning. I typed that he was being dramatic after getting exactly what he wanted. She answered 10 minutes later with a grey heart. No joke. I told myself calm men always weaponized silence. Then I put my phone face down and did not touch the watch. That night, Grant packed a small bag. He said he was going to a hotel and needed to see what was still structurally sound. I told him marriage was not one of his logistics reports. He said nothing. The front door closed softly, and the house sounded larger than before. The garage smelled like cold concrete, and the cardboard boxes Grant had stacked near the storage shelves. The thing is, a person packing files can look more frightening than a person shouting. Of course, I still told myself he was making a performance out of being calm. 2 banker boxes, 1 black watch on his wrist. No argument loud enough to grab. A week had passed. Grant came home after work, not to stay but to collect clothes, tax folders, and the hard drive from his desk. He moved through the house with a list in his head. Not rushed, not cruel. Practical in the way that used to make me feel safe, and now made me want to throw something small. I followed him into the garage. The light clicked twice before staying on. I told him we had to talk like adults. He said we could talk if the point was truth and not another rewrite. That made me laugh once, sharp enough to embarrass both of us. He lifted a file box from the shelf and placed it in the trunk of his car. I saw his wedding ring was not on his hand. It was probably in his pocket. The watch was still there. I said one thing I knew was true. I told him he had made me feel socially undefended because he stayed calm when people crossed lines. I said when clients talked over me, when Lindsay joked too hard, when Derek walked in like the past had rights in my house, Grant's calm made me feel alone. He looked at me, and the box stayed in his hands longer than it needed to. He said I was right that he sometimes confused restraint with protection. He said he thought not escalating meant not making things worse. He said he had not understood that silence could leave me standing by myself. There it was, the truth I wanted. He could not refute it. For a breath, I had something real between us. Then he said his failure did not give me the right to turn him into a test in front of my friends. It did not give me the right to invite Derek. It did not make the doormat joke harmless. It did not make his own living room a place where he had to prove he deserved the word husband. I hated how steady the list sounded. I said he only became interesting after another man challenged him. I said he wanted credit for a fire he kept hidden until I forced air into the room. That was my worst sentence because it was almost shaped like praise. Grant set the box down. He turned toward me fully. He said he had one offer. If I told the group the truth that the party had been planned and cruel, and if we went into counselling with no audience and no Derek, then he would sit down once and try to see what could be saved. Final. Clean. Not repeated. What he meant was that there was a door, and it had a handle. What I heard was that I had to humiliate myself to earn back the man I had just made impressive. I said I would not perform confession to make him feel powerful. I said he loved this new moral height too much. I said Brooke had probably fed him that line. His face did not move when I said Brooke's name. That annoyed me more than if he had defended her. The thing is, I reached for Lindsay then, without thinking. I sent her one message saying Grant wanted me to tell everyone the party was cruel, then another saying he was acting like a victim after winning. The third said I needed her to answer. A grey heart appeared under the last message, and nothing else came. That was all. One little heart where a voice used to be. I opened Derek's thread next because desperation likes familiar mistakes. He had sent a message that morning saying the party got weird and that he did not want drama. Weird. Not cruel. Not humiliating. Not something he had helped walk into my house. Just weird. I wrote that he could at least admit Grant had made him look foolish. Derek answered after 12 minutes that Grant had used leverage and that the whole thing was embarrassing for everyone. Then he added that he had never agreed to be part of my marriage problems. Agenda, dressed as distance. I looked up and saw Grant watching me read. He did not ask who it was. He did not need to. He said he was going to handle things properly. No legal words, no threat. Nothing dramatic enough for me to fight. I told him properly was his favourite way of saying cold. He picked up the last box and placed it beside the others in his trunk. Then he took a small envelope from the garage shelf, opened it, and removed our spare house key from the ring. He put the key on the workbench separate from the others. That was the silent marker, the quiet action tied to the house itself. I told myself he was being theatrical with objects because men like Grant did not know how to bleed out loud. He closed the trunk. Inside the house, Naomi had not answered my last message. Claire had read one and left it alone. Brooke had stopped replying to me after I accused her of enjoying Grant's wounded dignity. Mara had never pretended to be available. My circle had become a row of names with no open doors. Grant walked past me toward the driveway. I said he was leaving because he liked the version of himself that night gave him. I said he finally got to be the calm hero, and he was addicted already. He paused by the car door and looked back once. He said I still thought the damage was that he won. Then he got in the car and drove away with the black leather watch on his wrist and his wedding ring in his pocket. The mediation office lobby smelled like paper, old carpet, and coffee from a machine nobody wanted to clean. The thing is, I arrived expecting an informal separation talk. Of course, informal sounded better than abandoned. 2 plastic chairs, 1 glass door. No Lindsay. Grant sat beside Brooke, not touching her, not leaning toward her, just sitting there with a folder on his lap. Brooke saw me first. She gave me a small nod, the kind people give when kindness has limits. A man in a grey suit stepped out from the hallway and asked if I was Harper Bell. I signed because the clipboard was already in front of me. My signature came out too large. The pen left a dot of ink on my thumb, and I rubbed it against my skirt until the fabric darkened. The envelope held a petition for dissolution of marriage, with motion for temporary exclusive possession of the marital residence and temporary financial restraining orders. The first hearing was set for July 8, 2026, County Family Court, 10 a.m. I read the title again, then read the date. Grant did not look away from me. Brooke looked down at her hands. The evidence list was clean. Brooke's warning call, screenshots from the group chat where Lindsay called it a test, party videos from Naomi's phone, Claire's written statement about Derek's challenge, my introduction, and the room's reaction. The spare key placed on the garage workbench was listed as part of the separation timeline. I told the mediator it had only been a party that went wrong. She looked at the papers and said the documents described a planned humiliation in the marital home. Not angry. Not comforting. Just accurate. Derek sent one message before the appointment ended, saying he had never agreed to be involved and did not want his name dragged through this. Then my next text showed as undelivered. I moved into the guest room of a short-term rental staged with showroom furniture I once helped sell. The temporary financial order limited my access to shared accounts until the first hearing. Brooke stayed polite to Grant, Claire stopped answering me, and Lindsay became a name that appeared only in work emails. Derek blocked me after calling the party embarrassing for everyone. The showroom owner removed me from client-facing launch nights after the party video moved through the local design circle. The thing is, I thought testing Grant would show me whether I had married a weak man. Of course, that sounded better than admitting I wanted witnesses for my disappointment. He did prove himself that night. He also proved I was the person he needed protection from. The black leather watch stayed on his wrist in the mediation lobby. I wanted fire, and I became the thing he walked out of.